Dan calling from New York City. Welcome to the program, Dan.
Thank you, Sam. I just wanted to talk to you. I had actually tweeted you earlier. I wanted to talk to you about why primarily the left, in my opinion, is a joke.
Okay.
And that is, at this point, because it completely loses culture in the mix and seems to pretty much accept capitalistic culture and sort of the technocracy and everything that goes along with it. And it also, speaking of, Obama's speech, seems to imply that everything can be taken care of by our government and our corporations and policy instead of us changing ourselves, our behavior, our culture. And that's, in a nutshell, the biggest problem the left has.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about, let me address the second part of that first, okay? When you're talking about the environment, I think the implication you're saying is that we're going to ultimately need to restructure the way society functions if we're going to have any meaningful contraction of the resources that we expend.
Going forward, I would say that's pretty obvious. Yeah.
No, okay. Let's stipulate that for the sake of this discussion. I would say that, in fact, that is not something that we're going to be able to do as individuals. That's going to require governmental policy. If you're talking about...
I would absolutely agree.
Huh?
I would absolutely agree.
Okay.
It's not about individual choice, but it's about a mass sort of collective consciousness that is brought together by sort of a consensus of culture, and we are nowhere near it.
Oh, I would agree.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Going forward, that needs to be shaped. And the way to shape that, it's not that hard. You have to create institutions in communities that sort of show that way of living or being. That would be, the way of going into the future. And that's not the hardest thing to do. You buy houses and you set these things up. It's just pathetic that the left still throws money at, 1.6 million, nonprofits as if this kind of atomized, capitalistic, technocratic system has worked. It's been a complete failure. Get some real money together, set up community schools that teach people the skills they'll need going forward. It's not that hard.
Well, here's the difficulty, though. Here's the difficulty, Dan. Where's that money going to come from?
Well, that's true. I would say the money is going to come from people on the left basically calling out liberals who have the money. That includes, sort of me, although clearly I've gone pretty radical. And, people like you, and calling out people like, I hate to call people out, but I was listening to Mark Maron earlier, and I love Mark Maron. But he was chatting with Crispin, and they're chatting about making it. And I'm like, making it? Like, this is what our artists are concerned about, making it still? Like, that's the problem. Doesn't anyone get that?
Yeah,
so Norman Horowitz, that's Norman Horowitz's book, Making It. Anyway,
let me just respond to that. I think you're right about at least in terms of any criticism of Maron. I will certainly entertain. But I think the broader point. I think Mark Maron's not necessarily the problem. But I think the broader point. We talked about on this program a bit, and I would say the best. And maybe on this program we don't do enough of it, and part of it is as the show has continued, my capacity to sort of absorb sort of the sort of cultural sort of broader cultural currents has been somewhat diminished. Just out of sheer lack of time, and certainly my child has contributed to that, but. The most, I think, relevant interview that I've done on this program, at least on this relaunch, in terms of addressing what you're talking about, I think is with Fran Lebowitz back sometime, it was 2 years ago. I should have her back on, but we covered quite a bit.
I think it was November 30th, 2011.
There you go. And
Okay.
and I would and I think that's what you're talking about. And I think there has been I think this is actually a somewhat recent phenomena over the past 25 years, a total dominance of money as an ascendant value, to the extent that
Of course.
and Marin is not to pick on Marin, but certainly
It's not just Marin.
no,
Look
I
at
agree. I
Carrie
agree. I mean,
Brownstein.
the
Look at Carrie
example.
Brownstein doing a American Express ad with some Jesus Lizard music in the background. It made me puke. Like, what the heck is that? But
The
it's everywhere. It's that the left. It's that the left has lost its nose. It's that the left does not have limits. It has no ability to sort of check the individual, because the individual is the institution right now to the left. And this understanding that there's something else that might be greater than the individual to check sort of the greed or the materialism or the sort of ascendancy of the individual is just not there on the left anymore.
Yeah, something's
So
changed. I mean,
it's a big problem.
something's changed. Like I say, I think much of this happened over the past 20, 25 years, 30 years maybe, where, and for me, I am not, I don't perceive myself as any less culpable than Marin or what you're perceiving he's representing, at least in my own estimation. And, for me, one of the examples, and I think I used this when I was talking to Fran Lebowitz, was what I saw happen with independent film, in the early 90s, where, I had made a movie that was very low budget, and because of probably more of psychological reasons, I did not want to put myself in a position where it was somebody else's money, because I didn't want to have to listen to them.
Right.
One thing I noticed going through very quickly that happened in that independent film world around that time was the community that would support those films began to adopt the metric of not the for-profit industry, but the sort of established industry in terms of the merit of a film. In other words, there was a time in independent film, like when a guy like Cassavetes was making his films, where he would try and get it out there, but nobody would measure the quality of his film based upon its distribution deal that it got. Whereas what happened in independent film by the mid-90s was, if you didn't have a distribution deal, no one would take your movie seriously, even if they were supposedly in that community of independent filmmakers. And I found myself having the same reaction, even though I know I had made a good film that did not get distribution at that time. And that is not the problem, but that is indicative of a change that took place in our society, where there was not even a subculture anymore that did not use money as a gauge to measure value. And, that specifically has to do with the arts on some level, but I think it was indicative of a broader cultural problem. And we are so far away from that fight. I don't even know how to, frankly, even to engage it. I mean,
we're so far gone that I think we're done, frankly, but that's my opinion. But, it really does come down to the elites, and it comes down to sort of the artistic elites, especially, who are supposed to be, our paragons of truth and knowledge and value and substance, to sort of, create, they have more money than they've ever had, and you know who they are, and Roseanne talks a big game, and Alicia Keys calls herself an anarchist, and and I love Harry Belafonte and what he does, but even he could be doing more. But these people have a lot of money and are supposed to be our artists and our creative class, and they need to be stepping up. So that's one of my major points.
Without sort of trying to position myself outside of of those people who you're indicting, because I'm not convinced that I'm not worthy of that indictment. But I think in the main, you're right. I think Fran Lebowitz is really been the only person that I have come across that articulates that that articulates that message. And she was articulating that, and I was barely aware of her when we were doing the old Majority Report, and I remember when she articulated that to me on one of the first or second interviews that she came on. This is back in like 2004 or 2005 when she said the problems
These
with
people
liberals
are loaded.
She
like
said,
you know how much. I come from some wealth, so I understand how much wealth, and I understand how much a HUD foreclosure costs in Kansas City or Milwaukee or whatever. But do something. It's not brain science, and I'm trying, and it's hard, but I'm going to try to do something. And I encourage those with much more in the way of creativity and much more in the way of resources than I will ever have to do the same.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to indict you, and I congratulate Harry Belafonte because he actually calls out people like Jay-Z and others for sort of not quite doing what he expects them to be doing at their level of wealth and influence. So
the real question in some respects is what assuming let's not be bleak here for a moment. But assuming that there is a possibility for a cultural change, and this is where I would end up with Fran Lebowitz at the end of every interview I think I've ever done with her, is sort of where she would say, this has to come from the culture.
Well, the culture is the soil. Before you can really plant a really progressive politics, you have to, kind of have the underlying, institutions and the ideologies there that will produce that and help that rise up. I mean, that's how I view the culture.
Yeah, but the question is like, how does that get impacted? And then maybe it is, I think like there's a chicken and egg scenario here is that obviously it may be too late for those artists who are in their 40s, in their 50s, their 60s to expect that they're going to have this change. Although maybe, I don't know, I don't know how that happens, but obviously it's going to happen while these kids are, while these people are teenagers, before they get to that point where they then...
I think that's one of the problems is that you're asking a demographic who, by their very nature, has sort of worked on themselves their whole life and really trained themselves in one, not that they're, one-dimensional men and women necessarily, but that they, really put a lot of themselves into themselves, and then, and you find a certain type of person wants fame and wealth and gets it and gets to where they are.
Well, see, this
and
is,
it's not necessarily the person.
And I would encourage, if anybody knows of anybody who's written on this much, and maybe I should talk to Mark Crispin Miller about this, because the most sort of important thing I've ever read about this, I read 25 years ago, and actually quoted Crispin Miller back to him, and did not know that he had written it because I couldn't remember who the author of the book was, and it was a rather sort of embarrassing moment when you quote somebody and say, I can't remember who wrote it, and goes, that was me. But he had written a wonderful piece in a book called Boxed In about television that I think David Foster Wallace had quoted, and that's how I think I had come across it, was about television, essentially the message from television, the contextual uber message of television is that you need to be on television. that to really be important is you need to be on television. And it basically was sending a message of celebrity. And so when I look at what's happened with YouTube, where people are aspiring for fame based upon a combination of search engine optimization and talent too, but that is it. Like Maron's talking about making it. he still, for him, the reality is that his work and getting to truth through that work is still genuinely important to him in a way
Well,
that I
to
imagine
be,
still
yeah.
exists. And again, we're just using him as an example because my cultural sort of fluency is pretty limited at this point, and we're talking about the same person. But I worry that we're moving in the even further away from that, where art is
We
measured
are.
in its capacity to, is measured in its capacity to generate revenue and acclaim, as opposed to what its central message was supposed to reveal about the human condition. So. But this is a conversation that we can't do justice now. But call in more, and we'll continue on this. And I would say that if you have anything that you think I should read, or you think there's writers out there who are talking about this,
Very few,
yeah,
unfortunately. But
I know.
certainly, I mean,
Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. It's a
Neil
really
Postman?
good book on TV.
yeah, that's a good one. That one has a great preface or foreword that sort of compares.
If there's more of those, I encourage
Orwell,
people to send it in to me
Huxley.
at majorityreporters@gmail.com, because I would love to be able to expand the show in that way. But I just literally don't have enough time of the day to get exposed to that stuff, and I'm not even sure where to go.
There's very little of it, but I'll send you anything if I find it. And thanks for the conversation.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.